question which you sort of raised. 10 years ago, I think, our in many cases, mutual friend Paul Sappho told me, more than that, it was 15, said that called the internet a full employment act for entrepreneurs. I think you could now say, you could use that phrase again about the cloud and mobility. You could say these are also new opportunities for a full employment act for entrepreneurs. But the question is, as we see the rollout of technologies and also as we see the continued story of globalization, and like the internet, you know, globalization is a 25-year-old story and you ain't seen nothing yet. As we see these roll out, are we seeing more in the business of the future? Are we going to see large companies? Will large companies still play as big a role in the business ecosystem that they do now? Or will we see many more small companies networked together? Is it a big company future or a small company future?
The answer to that question, of course, is yes, but I think that you framed it in exactly the wrong way. Because you're going to have very large companies that don't employ a fraction of the people that large companies employed in the year 2000.
So sales huge, employment small.
The revenue to employee ratio is going to be transformed because of the brilliant innovations from people like SAP and the entrepreneurs represented here. And the one other area where I'm going to disagree with Professor Kaku is, you know, you can't mass produce minds. Forgive me, but my serious academic background was AI. You know, and if there's anything that we're focusing on, it's the ability to algorithmize, to use technology as a vehicle to either leverage individual minds or to usefully and cost-effectively automate or augment how people make decisions and how people create. So the economics are being transformed for this, and I think it's going to be a very interesting challenge how people are going to find jobs. I don't know what the answer to that is, but I know what the answer is not. The answer is not 4 years in college.
I'm going to pick a little quarrel with the word jobs, because I think that may be the model that doesn't work.
I thought you meant Steve Jobs. Sorry.
No, well, no. One never picks a quarrel with him. But it may just be that the idea that for those of us who are Americans, the idea that the choice between a W-2 and a W-9 may just become a different choice in terms of how you add value. But yes.
Yeah, I must disagree with my esteemed colleague here. Okay. First of all, let me say that science is the engine of prosperity. From steam power to electricity to the laser to the transistor to the computer.
That's not true.
We're talking about, hey, can I have my say? Okay.
Sure.
You had your say, let me have my say.
Yes.
However, the information revolution has a weakness, and the weakness is precisely the educational system. The United States has the worst educational system known to science. Our graduates compete regularly at the level of third world countries. So how come the scientific establishment of the United States doesn't collapse? If we're producing a generation of dummies, if the stupid index of America keeps rising every year, just watch network television and reality shows, right? How come the scientific establishment of the United States doesn't collapse? Let me tell you something. Some of you may not know this. America has a secret weapon. That secret weapon is the H-1B. Without the H-1B, the scientific establishment of this country would collapse. Forget about Google. Forget about Silicon Valley. There would be no Silicon Valley without the H-1B. And you know what the H-1B is? It's the genius visa, okay? You realize that in the United States, 50% of all PhD candidates are foreign-born. At my system, one of the biggest in the United States, 100% of the PhD candidates are foreign-born. The United States is a magnet sucking up all the brains of the world, but now the brains are going back. They're going back to China. They're going back to India. And people are saying, oh my God, there's a Silicon Valley in India now. Oh my God, there's a Silicon Valley in China. Duh. Where did it come from? It came from the United States. So don't tell me that science isn't the engine of prosperity. You remove the H-1B visa and you collapse the economy. In Wall Street Journal, editorialized against a congressman who wanted to ban the H-1B, saying they'll take jobs away from the American people. The Wall Street Journal said, look, there are no Americans who can take these jobs. These are at the highest level of high technology. They don't take away jobs from Americans. They create entire industries. And so that's why we have an Achilles heel, and that's the educational system. And again, sociology majors are not necessarily going to be the ones determining the future of Silicon Valley, but physicists, engineers. We need more of them, not less.
The irony is, I agree with the immigration issues, that what you're saying. And I'm at a school, of course, and Peter's a graduate of a school where indeed immigration.
Your school wouldn't exist without the H-1B.
Of course. But I'm not.
We've got to get back to the future of business.
But hold on a second. I'm not. No. I'm not arguing against an H-1B. I completely agree with this issue, and the point on the future of business that he's making, which is very, very important, is the nature of human capital. What is misunderstood here is, again, how poorly run schools are. MIT is a notable exception in this regard. His school is not, because what happens is they run in these introductory science and engineering classes at Illinois and Wisconsin and Michigan. They run freshman and sophomore years as flunk-out operations. They run it as a boot camp, and then people are surprised that people don't take science, that they don't take the STEM courses. The point that I'm trying to make, which I think is an important one in this regard, is that the way educational systems are set up right now is that we have distorted incentives that undermine the ability for America to have a homegrown science and technology center. Immigration is a wonderful child of immigrants.
I want to move this just a second. I want to move this from an American conversation to a global conversation. It is a global economy and so on. I mean, obviously, to those of us who are Americans, this matters hugely politically, but as we talk about the future of business, one pretty clear thing is that it's going to be increasingly borderless. And one of the questions we sort of want to ask is, if you're wearing your CEO hat, some of these implications might be where you're going to put your headquarters. Are you going to put your headquarters in Bangalore or in Buenos Aires or in Silicon Valley? You've got a lot of issues around that. But I'd like to move it to that. Peter, you had your hand up first, and I know you want to comment on this, and then I want to start asking about some questions about where the big industries will be in the future. But yeah.
So to bring this back to the focus on SAP and mobility and cloud, the fact of the matter is that the rate of changing is increasing. The rate of change is increasing, period. And we're working into a day and age where the ability for, again, an individual or a small team to innovate and build a company is greater than ever before. The cloud and mobile computing, 3D printing, AI-enabled capabilities are going to allow for the birth of extraordinary industries. And the fact of the matter is, there is no industry that's safe. Medicine, I just got finished speaking to a group of 500 medical CEOs. Over the next 10 years, medicine is going to be completely redefined. And the fact of the matter is that when regulations are holding an industry back, like it is in medicine, it simply means it's going to be redefined in a different country. There are no boundaries anymore. Companies are multinational, individuals are multinational, ideas go across the globe at the speed of light, and we're going to see a rate of change that is not stopped by regulation, especially when governments can no longer regulate at the speed of change that's going on right now. So I think you're doing a pretty good job from where I sit.
And it may actually be interesting to see, for example, one of the most regulated industries in the world is education. And the education industry itself is not immune from these disruptive forces. But Isabel, you wanted to comment, and if I may, what I'd like to do is I'd like to exploit your gender to say, let's talk a little bit about the role of women in the corporation of the future. And I hate to just put you on the representative spot, but you're on it. But as we think about some of these issues, let's talk about half of humanity, and is there a particular, are there things that we need to bear in mind as we look at the business in 10, 15 years? Are we going to see a step change finally in the participation of women in corporate life or in economic life generally?
Well, let's say that thanks to SAP and other technologies, technology is the best friend of a woman. So probably companies will be more transparent, will be more meritocratic. So let's back to technology, which is more interesting than this topic. And
Okay.
I will continue his thoughts, and collect yours, because big companies will have less employees, and perhaps the reduction will come on the headquarters, because thanks to technology, we can have centralized processes, but not centralized headquarters. It can be decentralized. And that's part of the changes that we will have to face in the future, how to learn to deal without headquarters. Because people and talent will be distributed all over the world.
So the old centralization, decentralization debate is over. It's the wrong debate now. We can centralize and decentralize just as we can do business models in a whole new way.
That depends, according to efficiency, we will decide what to centralize, and according to the reach that we want to get, we will decentralize some other activities that make sense. But, it has nothing to do with a physical, big building, large people, that is somehow.
So if I put in my consultant hat, it's a 2x2 with efficiency and reach, right?
Exactly.
I mean, I have to do a 2x2 up, right? And so we have efficiency and we have reach and we have centralization and we have different solutions in organization design, depending on how we make those trade-offs.
And new capabilities, because we will need to coordinate and to communicate in a different way.
I'd like to raise the larger issue of globalization, because that's what we're tiptoeing around. Let me give you two examples of globalization, Japan and India. In Japan, we have, in some sense, a negative example, where we have very large corporations that are incapable of making very small, rapid changes to the economy. And one reason why the Japanese economy is stagnating is because of the sclerotic distribution of goods, the fact that competition is not allowed. Rice, for example, is artificially propped up. It means that you cannot have a free marketplace. And that's one reason for the stagnation of Japan for the last 15 years. Now look at India. There was a big debate years ago in India about whether or not to set up an optical fiber network connecting India with the rest of the world. Fiber optic, state-of-the-art. People said it's too much money. It's useless. India doesn't need such a thing. And now look, that is the lifeline, the lifeblood. The lifeblood of the new generation of Silicon Valleys in India is precisely because of the investment they made in the highest technology, getting fiber optic cables and getting India wired up to the rest of the world. And that's a challenge for all businesses, all nations. The playing field is going to be global. The playing field is going to be international. And unless you can compete on the international stage, you're going to be out faster than you realize. Because, yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Finish. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I thought you would finish, but I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh.
Go ahead.
So what I'm saying is, in a situation where we have perfect capitalism, perfect knowledge, a knowledge about all products, goods, services, marketing, people's instincts to buy, and so on and so forth. In a situation where we have perfect capitalism, perfect knowledge, it means there's going to be enormous pressure on the global marketplace. And nations which cannot compete are going to see their economies stagnate, like what happened in Japan.
So let me ask you this question. We don't have too much time left, and what I'd like to do is I'd like to give each of you a choice between two questions. Answer one, or if you can answer the two at the same time, and what it is. One question is if the sort of venture fairy came down and gave you a large sum of money, whatever a large sum of money is, $1 billion, $100 million. If you had a big amount of money to invest, where would you put it? And the second question is more about organizations. If you go back 100 years ago, people working in groups did not know how to create or run multi-divisional corporations. That's something we now know. If you go back 25 years ago, people did not know that they could create an encyclopedia or create an operating system without a corporation. So we have new forms of collaboration. What new form of collaboration might exist in 20, 25 years that we can barely imagine now? So one question is, where would you bet? And the other question is, do you think that mankind, humankind, will be able to collaborate in some striking new way in the future? And you can pick either or both or whatever, but who wants to grab it?
I'll start, be very quick on this. The first one on the 100 million is easy. I bet on people. There are certain people, and I think the difference between now and 20 years ago is between LinkedIn, Facebook, and Google, the new genres of social media. My span of knowledge, my span of influence, my reach has been dramatically changed. So the whole notion of what it means to bet on people has been globalized, with or without H1B visas. The collaboration, so I've written a book on collaboration, and I want to come at that question from an orthogonal attack. What I think is a profound revolution, and I hate that phrase, but it is a profound revolution, is that when I went to school, the engineering paradigm was systems integration. Now what we see is, and what the cloud is a manifestation of, is interoperable systems. Interoperability is going to be the vehicle and medium for linking medical devices to IT, to new materials. Having APIs, new genres of interoperability are going to facilitate new genres of collaboration and innovation.
Yeah, I would bet on 3 industries that are going to be big. One is biotech. In the coming years, all of us will have a CD-ROM with every single gene in our body listed. It'll cost about $1,000 in a few years. It'll cost $100 perhaps in 10 years' time. That's going to open up bioinformatics. It's going to revolutionize medicine. Medicine is going to be reduced to computer science. Computer science will dominate almost all medicine in the future. We'll have a human body shop, able to grow new organs of the body, extend the human lifespan, control cancer. We're talking about a revolution in biotech. Second is entertainment. Entertainment is going to be huge in the future because everyone likes to laugh, everyone likes to communicate, and entertainment is intellectual capital. Robots cannot make intellectual capital. Entertainment is something that is going to be huge. Social networks, all of that is going to be wrapped up into the gigantic entertainment industry. And third, further down the line, maybe in 20, 30 years, robotics is going to be big. I think it's going to be bigger than the automobile industry, but not today. Our most advanced robots today have the intelligence of a cockroach, a stupid cockroach.
Isabel.
If I were rich, I would spread the money, because I don't think that putting too much money on any small company is good for them. I think that you know, the intellectual goes faster when you have to speed up the resources and to improve the resources that you are given. But I will choose something to do with crowdfunding or something to do with cloud learning, because we need to speed up the way we learn. We invest 20% of our life in just learning. We will have to continue learning all our life, but just learning, we invest 20% of our lives, and that's perhaps too much for the future. Something to do with recycling, because we are going to be much more people consuming much more goods, so probably something about recycling, something about water, because it's the new goal of the future. And something to prevent diseases, or something to early diagnosis of diseases. And what I imagine for the next 20 years is some way to improve our delivering cycle. You know, we spend 20% of our life just learning when we are more productive, more imaginative, and then the last 20% yeah, on the entertainment business, but on the other side. So I would like to see how can we improve 40% of our lives in a more efficient way.
Peter, give you the last word, except for mine.
3 years ago, Ray Kurzweil and I started a new university called Singularity University in Silicon Valley to look at exponentially growing technologies and how they affect businesses and individuals. And we challenge our graduate students to build a company that can affect 1 billion people within 10 years. That's the metric for success. And we looked at these next decades. In this next decade, as you said, biotech, cloud computing, and then the Internet of Everything, embedded network systems are going to give birth to the next $100 billion industries. The decade after that, distributed manufacturing, 3D printing, AI, robotics are going to give birth to multi-$100 billion industries. And the decade after that, we start to really play into the nanomaterials, nanotechnology arena. Each of these decades, again, disruptive and amazing potential for transforming humanity.
And boy, the difference. Right now, 6 of the top 10 companies in the Fortune Global 500 are energy companies. And I don't imagine that that will be true at the end of any one of those decades as we go forward. We're just about out of time. I want to try to summarize a couple of themes that I heard and put them in a little bit of different context. One, as Gabriel Byrne said at the beginning when he was talking about the imaginations in this room and the imaginations on the web and the imaginations around the world, is the power of intellectual capital, the power of creativity, the power of the people in whom you might invest in a world in which we're surrounded by systems and by a seemingly ever-growing computing power, the power of the individual and collective intelligence as an economic engine seems to be paradoxically rising enormously. Second, the theme of urbanization. In the next 20 years, in the coming decades, there will be more city building than in the whole history of humankind beforehand. That represents, we've calculated, about a $350 trillion business opportunity. It shows up in many of the industries described here, but think of that opportunity as the biggest B2B play in the history of capitalism. The biggest B2C play in the history of capitalism we've also talked about indirectly, which is the emergence of a global middle class and a truly global middle class. The Gen Y, the millennial generation, in sheer numbers is the biggest generation ever to exist, and by 2030, 85% of the global middle class will live in Brazil, Russia, India, and China. That's a lot of households to furnish, a lot of tourists to fleece, a lot of makeup and household goods to sell. It's an extraordinary B2C opportunity. And a third one that we sort of mentioned, and even though Isabel said it was boring, I want to bring it up, is what I like to think of as the third billion. If women ever fully enter into economic life as talent, as participants in corporations, or as consumers, it will be the equivalent of adding another India or China to the global economy, a non-trivial addition. And all of these things play into those. I think of those things as three huge opportunities, and we've heard an awful lot about how industry might reconfigure itself in order to take advantage of those opportunities. Based on all you've heard this morning, it's apparent that technology is going to change our world and our organizations in the years to come, and we've got to be ready. These next few days are an opportunity for you to explore how you can ready your business for the future now. I'd like to invite you on SAP's behalf to attend ASUG's keynote session this afternoon with guest speaker Michael Eisner, which will be followed by a special ASUG 20th anniversary celebration. Before I let you go, I want to ask you to join me in thanking this extraordinary panel for a conversation that was just brilliant. Thank you very much. And now, to all of you there and those attending virtually, we wish you a wonderful Sapphire Now.